Josh, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I am so excited to talk to you. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I have been following your journey since last year when people started sending me these videos of this man, you, coming out as a trans woman. And they were very funny, and none of us could figure out if they were real or satirical. So everybody like in the group chat would be going back and forth being like, is this guy for real? And we were trying to figure this out, looking to like we'd be like, no, for sure he's joking, and then be like, no, for sure he's serious. And it's just it's the perfect parody of such a ridiculous trend.
Yeah, it is. And I think "is this real" is kind of a misnomer, right? Because what is real? We're all just men in makeup cosplaying as women. So I find it very interesting when people say Josh was faking it. He was a faker. Well, welcome to the club. We're all fakers. We're all men pretending to be women, and the only real ones are women. And so I think there's a lot of misuse of language and misnomers around it. And I think it's not just a semantical thing. I think it's very important. Language is very important. And it's very frightening to see how the left has kind of hijacked language and is twisting words to really not mean what they are supposed to mean. And sometimes, in many cases, they're twisting it to mean the opposite of what it should mean. Like now, a woman can mean a man. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really astute point, actually, because, and I've said this many times over the years in debating people who are telling me that trans women are women and that, okay, sure. So some guys might be faking it to try to access women's spaces, but what about the real ones? And I was like, what are you talking about? What's the real one? What are the real men that are actually really women versus the men who are faking it? What does that mean?
Well, you know what they mean, and they'll never say this, is they mean the truly deranged ones. What they mean is Josh is sane and he's logical and he knows this is absolutely ridiculous. What about the mentally ill ones? And we would concede that point and go, yes, Josh is not a mentally ill man in a costume. He's actually sane. And so I think that is the only distinction between me and the millions of other trans women out there is I'm just not deranged. And the fact that they think being deranged is a prerequisite to becoming a woman, as if it magically imbues them with womanhood, so long as they are deranged enough to satisfy gender dysphoria or to satisfy the definition of a trans woman, I think is really sad. And so that is kind of the fulcrum of their entire argument, is that if we are mentally ill enough, then we become women. And I think it's absolutely asinine.
It's interesting because it's an insult, and these are the people who are claiming to be defensive of this supposed group, but they're really saying these people are all insane.
Yes, they are. And what's funny, though, is the medical literature actually says you don't have to have gender dysphoria to be a valid trans woman. You don't have to get transition surgery. You don't have to do anything other than say and articulate my gender identity is female and I was born a man. And that, by the medical guidelines and the current scientific literature, satisfies the requirements of being a trans woman. And so you actually don't even have to be mentally ill, according to the literature, to be a valid trans woman. All you have to do is be a man that says he's a woman, and that is it. And I challenge anyone to prove me wrong on that.
Yeah, exactly. It's, if you want to say, if you want to make a distinction between who's real and fake, then what does real mean? And the trans activists themselves have screwed themselves because there's no coherent definition of what it means to be trans.
It is so porous, it is so amorphous. And like you said, they have done it to themselves to allow anyone to self identify as a trans person, that it's utterly meaningless. And that is why I was able to exist, right? And this whole Josh Seiter trans troll was able to happen is because the left lunatics made their definition so utterly meaningless that I could walk around with a full beard and say I'm a woman, and they're forced to say, well, according to our definition, yeah, I guess you are.
At what point did you come up with this idea to start this trans troll?
Me and my friends, I think we have like a good sense, a healthy sense of humor. And so we're always lampooning and mocking things that are going on in the world. It's the only way you can cope with kind of the crazy times we're living in. But what really set me off was I have nieces and nephew, and I have a 6.5 twins that are 6.5, and then an 8-year-old. And I was seeing stuff on YouTube Kids, Disney Plus, and other kids oriented platforms talking about non binary and being trans and sexual orientation and things that were wholly inappropriate for little kids. And when I started seeing those, these were like cartoons and ads for these cartoons. I said, this is disgusting, and I need to do something to show how utterly stupid it is. And my friend said, well, dude, if you criticize it in any way, keep in mind this was like late 2022, right? So we're at the height of wokeness, the height of Biden's insanity and the things that he was saying and censoring and deplatforming anyone with an opposing opinion. And he goes, dude, if you criticize it, you're going to get canceled. They're going to say you're transphobic. And I said, well, what if I become one of them and then I mock it and destroy it from the inside like a Trojan horse? And he was like, that's actually a really good idea. So what are you going to do? I said, I'm just going to say I'm a trans woman, and then I'm going to show how stupid it is. So our whole goal was kind of using reductio ad absurdum and Poe's law and just showing how if you take something to its logical end, it has absolutely absurd results, which thereby proves that it's utterly stupid and meaningless. So
Yeah, like the videos I was just watching one earlier today. You were in Target and you were looking for lingerie and you were asking where all the tuck friendly lingerie is. And you say, I feel like all women have a right to feel beautiful and seen when they're trying on clothes. And it's important for those of us blessed in certain departments that we have clothes that fit our large appendages and that we feel beautiful. You say, I hope one day we can have trans-friendly departments everywhere, including maternity, so that our shopping experience is a positive one and we don't have to struggle to fit in. And, I can hardly keep a straight face saying that, but it's quite literally what a trans would say.
yes, and I was trying to highlight showing the juxtaposition, right? Women's lingerie and juxtaposing next to a huge a huge massive appendage that I still have swinging between my legs because whether they like to admit it or not, 87 to 93% of them have not gotten bottom surgery. So up to 93% of them are still walking around with dong and testes, and that's something that, proves how ridiculous it is. And so I thought, I have to spell it out for these people, right? How can I spell it out that we are literally calling men with large appendages women? And I was like, I'll go lingerie shopping and complain about it. And so that's kind of where that bit came about.
When you first came out, what was the reaction? Did people get angry? Did most people kind of fall for it and celebrate you?
There's a little mix of both. That's a great question. So there was lots of people that were like, "We support you on this journey. That's amazing." And what I see now, and there's some articles that say this is Josh says he's a victim because the left was kind to me. Josh says, "I survived the left being kind to me." Big deal, Josh. So we were nice. No, it is not nice to encourage mental illness. It's not nice to indulge mental illness. It's not nice to encourage men to invade women's spaces, and it's not nice to call men women. What you're essentially saying is men can do women better. And we just saw that in that magazine that just came out where they named the 50 most amazing women in the world, and over half of them are men. You're basically saying men can do women better. Let it show you how it's done. It's highly misogynistic and patriarchal and disgusting. And so, they were not being kind, they were being delusional. And so I think those people deserve to be mocked for being kind to me. And then the other half were saying, rightly so, this is ridiculous. You're clearly a guy. Just because you throw on a dress and you put on a costume, it doesn't make you a woman. And so silently, I was going, yes, a lot of these people are getting it. The point's being driven home. So I was encouraged to see that about 70 to 80% of people were like, you know what? A man saying he's a woman doesn't make him a woman, even if he claims to have gender dysphoria or be mentally ill. It's still just a man that's mentally ill. At no point does he transform into a woman. So that was kind of nice to see. And I think by the end of it, most people, that curtain was kind of lifted on the whole movement. And they said, you know, if their eyes weren't open before, I think they're opened a little bit more after my experiment and said, yeah, I think Josh kind of showed that it's all kind of nonsense. So.
And what about out in the real world when you're making these videos and you have lipstick on and you're, shopping for lingerie or whatever it is that you're doing? How were people reacting to you in public?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I live in Chicago, and where I live, it's like most of Chicago, a progressive area. I live by Wrigley and Logan Square area, and so this is a highly blue, highly liberal area. And so you see trans people and all types of different people, alternative styles, lifestyles all the time. And so no one even batted an eye at me. But unlike these perverted men that have autogynephilia, I'm not a sexual pervert like them, and I don't like putting on display my fetish for the public, right? Of cross dressing, and so I would always wear a heavy coat and cover my face until I got to the location that I was going to film these very short 10 to 30-second clips at. Then I would take my heavy coat off, be in the dress, film the clip, and then put the coat on. Because unlike them, I'm not deranged and I don't want to parade this around in public. And so I was very conscious of the fact that there might be kids around. And I made sure when I filmed it was in a pretty isolated place, but obviously, like Target, that was a public place. But I filmed that actually 10 minutes before they closed, so the store is pretty dead.
Mm. And at what point did you decide to come clean and sort of go public with the fact that it was all a troll?
So we decided from the outset, me and my friends that kind of thought this idea up, let's do about 6 months. So right around the 5 month mark, I was like, I put out, I think by that point I put out 100 videos or so. I was like, I think this has kind of reached its natural climax and it's time to do the reveal and drive home the point that this whole woke movement is very pernicious and harmful, especially because of the children aspect, which was my whole motivation and impetus behind wanting to do this. I was like, I want to come out and do the reveal now and say how dangerous I think this movement is. I'm sick. I get that the videos are popular and this is a funny joke, but I actually want to drive home this principle now. So at the 6 month mark, me and Alex Stein had become friends by that point, along with Tim Pool at Timcast. And so we all kind of talked about it. We're like, yeah, Josh, you should do the reveal on Alex Stein's show. And Timcast actually sent a documentary crew out there to film the reveal. And then it unfolded that way last October.
Were people angry?
At that time, it was almost all support online. For the next few months on X and on Instagram, there's just an outpouring of support from people saying, one of the main ones I remember is Tristan Tate reached out to me, Andrew Tate's brother, and he said, what you did being this Trojan horse was one of the most singular, most seminal events that's ever happened when it comes to destroying gender ideology. Thank you so much for your service. And then he had me on his show the next day. And I got a lot of messages like that, just thanking me and saying, this is a dangerous ideology. And we needed someone to show how ridiculous it was that was immune from attacks of being transphobic, and the only way to do that is to pretend to be one of them. And so it was really great. And then I'd say for about 3 months after that, I got a lot of vitriol and a lot of hateful backlash on X from a lot of weirdos in the Alphabet Mafia, in the TQIA community. Normal LGBs absolutely love me, and I got so much support from the millions of normal LGBs out there who want absolutely nothing to do with this identity politics and weird fetish that has jumped on to their movement like a parasite, and is kind of sucking it dry. And so a lot of love and support from the LGBT community.
Yeah. And so lately, you've been doing videos where you show up at the No Kings protests and the anti-ICE protests. One of them I saw recently was very funny, and again, a bunch of people sent this same clip to me where you're wearing a native headdress kind of thing, calling yourself Walking Tomahawk, and saying things like trans indigenous people are indigenous people, trans natives love ICE, we want ICE to deport all the cis illegals, trans nations are just as valid as cis nations. You asked one of the protesters there if he was trans native phobic. I mean, it's so good. Like, it's so pointed, and it similarly, it really demonstrates how kind of irrational and nonsensical this kind of ideology and this kind of language really is. um how did you and why did you start coming up with those ideas, and why did you specifically want to go to the anti-ICE rallies and the No Kings rallies?
Yeah, so to answer the latter part of your question, I'm in Chicago, and so there's a lot going on with ICE right around me within just a few miles radius of me. So it's so easy for me to just walk outside and go to these protests. The reason I wanted to do it as a trans indigenous, and I've also done trans illegal or trans Mexican, is because just that slight shift in perspective kind of shows and reveals how absurd this whole gender ideology is, right? They say, oh, gender is such a fluid and social construct that it's not a binary. You can be whatever you want. It's all about how you self-identify. And I thought, well, our race and ethnicity is even more fluid and even more amorphous and even more undefined than being a man or a woman. That's pretty defined. And of course, gender is just a weird red herring that they kind of throw in the mix. It's a made up fictitious term that a weird doctor in the 60s invented, Dr. John Money, so he could forcibly transition children because he was a deviant. And it's an utterly meaningless term that has nothing to do with whether someone is a man or a woman. It has nothing to do with the biological realities and differences between men and women, but the woke mob has to use gender because they know if they talk about sex, it's very defined and it's not amorphous at all. And so I just got to thinking, I thought, well, if we can change our gender and identify as anything we want, surely I can identify as a different race or a different national origin or a different ethnicity. And so I decided to do Walking Tomahawk, a trans indigenous person that was assigned the wrong skin pigmentation and national origin at birth. And I have racial dysphoria, and I'm sick of everyone being trans native phobic, and they need to be educated that trans indigenous people are just as valid as cis indigenous people. And so I just stole their language to explicate how utterly stupid gender ideology is. And I think that's why the video's so popular right now. It has like 400,000 shares in 2 days and 5 million views. It's insane. And I think it's because it's helping people kind of see how stupid gender ideology is.
Yeah. And how are people reacting to you at these protests when you show up in this character?
There's a lot of hate. So when I did the trans Mexican at the anti ICE rally, it's mostly white liberal women,
Of course.
some Latino men and women sprinkled in. Most of them look like they don't have jobs. Most of them look dirty. They're not people I would ever associate, or any of us would probably ever associate with in real life. They have time at 9 in the morning to go complain at these protests. And so I met with a lot of hate and a lot of animus. And usually the police have to step in and form a circle around me because these peaceful and loving people are actually very violent, and they try to attack me. But in the video that's going viral now, where I was trans indigenous, that was a fairly peaceful gathering until the head of ICE showed up, and then it became a violent mob. And I posted that clip on X. But overall, people are angry. They ask me, "Why are you doing this? Why are you being disrespectful?" And I go, I mean, I'm trans. I'm trans Mexican. What's wrong? When they're like, "You're appropriating someone else's culture." And I said, "Well, if men can do woman face, I can do Mexican face." or I can do Indian face because you guys have said it's okay. And they never have a comeback to that. So
Do you think that these stunts are making liberals or leftists, the woke, whatever you want to call them, realize how ridiculous they are? Like, do you think it's actually succeeding and embarrassing them a
I think
bit?
there's a degree of cognitive dissonance when they hear me regurgitating the exact same language that they use all the time with gender ideology. I think in their minds they go, you know what, race is different than gender, ethnicity is different than gender. But when I explain to them that actually race and ethnicity are much more undefined and fluid and amorphous than our sexes, they don't ever have a comeback for that. But I think they have to tell themselves that there's this thing called gender that they've been told about, and we can totally pick it. And so what Josh is doing is a bad analogy. But I think they're going to keep lying to themselves, and there's a lot of self delusion going on. They've all been brainwashed, they've all internalized the brainwashing. I think that's why this movement targets young kids, because they know that thinking, intelligent adults would never accept, right, that we can choose whether we're a man or a woman. We all know intuitively and through intelligence that you can't choose whether you're a man or a woman. And so they target kids. And so I think these people are very deluded, and maybe it resonates with some of them. I think I might plant a seed of enlightenment in some of their brains where they go, you know what, this does sound crazy. You know what, gender ideology is stupid. This doesn't make a lot of sense. Josh is kind of proving a point, but they're deranged, so who knows?
Yeah, it's really strange, the woke mind virus, as it's been called. It, I mean, it's, you have to kind of refer to it as a cult because it makes no sense, but people are so impassioned about it and really blindly follow whatever the cult tells them, regardless of how ridiculous, irrational, stupid, or dangerous it is. Was there a certain point when you saw or realized, the left has gone crazy?
I would say it was with gender ideology, and I think that's the case with most people, right? I think that's why Donald Trump got elected. I think the country was kind of moving a little towards the left after Trump's first term, and then they just came full out with this gender ideology nonsense. You had Kamala Harris arguing that men should be able to, violent murderers, males should be placed as cellmates in women's prisons, and she was going to fund their transition surgeries. You had all of this nonsense with men invading women's spaces and collegiate sports. And I think that woke up so many people. And I actually credit and thank gender ideology with giving conservatives this last election, with kind of turning the tide. And, I think the best explanation for it is there's been many polls that have come out after Donald Trump's victory, and it showed that 80% of Americans do not agree with gender ideology, specifically how it's being articulated by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. 80% of Americans are not on board with that nonsense. And so that's reassuring. And I think that is what's woken most people up. And I think that's what's made a lot of people push back against the woke mind virus. And so I think that trend will continue where people keep waking up, they keep questioning the absurd conclusions that they're being told by the left. And hopefully that trend continues.
Yeah, I really hope that we don't backtrack because there seems to be a lot of forward momentum in terms of pushing back unapologetically against woke ideology in general, but really specifically the gender identity ideology stuff, especially in America. It's been happening in the UK as well. I'm Canadian, and sadly, but predictably, Canada is not paying attention. But yeah, it does seem to me like this stuff is on its way out. Is that what you see?
I do see it on its way out. There's other things, though, that are concerning to me. And of course, the media shapes the narrative, not just through what they say, but the things they leave out, right? You can lie with overt lies and also by omission. And the things that the media omits help shape the news a lot. And so they kind of are shaping the news to look like everybody in mass is against the deportation of illegals that have broken into our country and other things like that. So I think there are a lot of issues kind of circling the orbit that are going to be very determinative of where people how they vote in the next election. And I am hopeful that common sense will kind of reign over that election as well. But there's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts, and Trump can be kind of a demagogue. Trump does do some very brash things and controversial things, and he says very controversial things. So I don't know if that there could be a backlash just given how strong of a leader he is, where people don't want that in the future. But as you said, I think most people are waking up to how destructive the left is and how dangerous it is, supporting illegals breaking into our country, seeming to support violent crime and criminals and no bail, gender ideology. There's just so many things that I think common sense people are waking up to that I think the trend is going to continue, where the pendulum that had once swung in the very, very woke direction all through early 2020s is going to swing back towards the silent majority that we used to see back in the day. I think there was always kind of a silent majority in this country that was scared to come out, and I think they've come out now. So
Do you have a favorite character?
I would say the trans indigenous one is my favorite because Walking Tomahawk is just a hilarious name. And the fact that I can tell anybody to screw off because trans natives are natives and this is my land, I think is hilarious. And so I just think there are so many funny things you can do with it. The trans Mexican is funny, but I actually love Latino people in general, not the illegal ones. And I love Native Americans as well. I really do. I just think it's funny, and the feathers, they're like 10 feet in the air and they're like blowing in the wind and coming off my head. The transracial guy that I did is funny too. I wear a do rag and I get very offended when people ask. I didn't know white guys needed do rags, and then I say, "Excuse me, bigot," and start shaking. I am not white. I was assigned the wrong skin pigmentation at birth. So that's a good one too. But yeah, I like that they're all kind of resonating with people. So.
Yeah. Yeah. The trans Mexican is funny in particular because in several of the clips you have this mustache literally just taped onto your face and it's kind of coming off. And
Off and it kept flying off my face. And so I had my hand up there and it looked so stupid. So my friend said, "Bro, when you go to the next protest, put 8 pieces of scotch tape on that damn thing so your hand's not covering your mouth the whole time." And so that's what I could have just ordered a new one. I don't know why that wasn't an option, but
I like the tape. It's good.
yeah.
What's next for you?
So what I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I want to, I love that I've kind of gotten away from just the gender ideology thing and I'm tackling the immigration thing. I think it's very important that people, it's sad we even have to say this, understand the distinction between legal and illegal immigration. And there's hundreds of thousands of people trying to do the right thing and immigrate to our country legally, and they're going through a very long process to get the proper documents and pay the money just to get cut in front of by millions of illegals that are getting tons of free benefits when they break into this country. I mean, it's really egregious. So I'm glad that I can tackle that issue, and I want to keep tackling other issues as well. And I was just talking to someone, they're like, "Do you want to do anything else with the trans indigenous person?" I said, "Yeah. Another big issue comes up in politics, I'd love to apply that character to something else." I have an interview with Newsmax tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to that. I have an interview with Sky News coming up. I'm looking forward to that. So I just want to keep the dialogue going. I want to keep talking, keep getting people thinking, kind of push the envelope and push their buttons. And a lot of people have said, "Why did you decide to do this?" And And I always say there was such a chill on free speech under Biden and during the super woke era when everyone was getting canceled and deplatformed just for having a different opinion, even if that opinion was factually right. And I wanted to just bring free speech back. I am a huge believer in John Stuart Mills and what he said in his book on liberty, that the free marketplace of ideas, right? That is so important to a democracy. And as long as you have that, you'll have democracy. But when you start censoring speech, that's when you get in a really dangerous area. And sadly, it's the left that's, even though they're always calling everyone else a fascist, they always revert to fascism in censoring speech that they don't like. And I think that is so dangerous for our country. You see it in Canada, you see it in Australia, in New Zealand, in the UK, where people are getting jailed for Facebook posts that are critical of Islam and gender ideology. And so I just want to keep open dialogue going. And so I'm just going to keep doing whatever I have to do to accomplish that.
Well, I love what you're doing. I think it's great. It's so funny. It's so pointed. It's perfect. Let people know. I'm sure lots of my followers are already following you, but for those who are not, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so I'm on X at Josh_Seiter, Seiter, and I'm on Instagram where I'm most active at Josh_Seiter_official. And those are my main two platforms. I'm not on TikTok because they censor so much, and all my friends are getting kicked off of TikTok just for stating factual things. So those are the two places that I'm at.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad that we could do this. I really appreciate it. It was great to talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.